Recording is
Hello
on.
everyone. So welcome to another class of C programming. So today we're going to discuss about functions. Suppose let's give the definition of a function. So far we have seen main function, right? In C programming function. Let's see. Definition. Definition is it is a collection of tasks or statements. Okay? Statements can be operation or it can be print, right? So it's a collection of tasks or statements. All right. There is two types of functions. Functions. First is a return type function. Return type function. Second is no return type. No return type function. Okay. Return type function starts with uh, integer or float or char, right? If you see your function data type is void, that means it has no return, okay? If you see this type of data type, that means your function will not return any value. If you see your uh, function starts with integer, float, or char, or uh, double, it has a return value. For example, let's say integer, let's say sum. So this is a definition of uh, function. Okay, this curly braces, opening and close curly brace, is a block of this function. So this function will do all the tasks inside this curly bracket. Okay? And this type of functions can receive parameters. Parameters uh, is the value that you want to calculate, right? It could be 3 or 4. Now let's see two parameters. So these parameters, we have two parameters. Their data type must be same with function data type. Okay, this is very important. If your function data type is integer, that means your parameters data type also integer. You cannot put float here. Okay, so that's an error. Okay. If you want to make a float function, then you have to change whole function to float type, data type. All right. Okay, then here we have statements. Then at last we do have return value. Okay, this is how you define a return type function. So this is a function. All right. Okay. Next is a void function. In the void function, we will not have any return value. Okay. That means integer num1, integer num2. Let's see. Here you will have a statement. That's it. Normally statement end up with print, right? So it will not return anything. That's the difference between return type and no return type. It's depending on this data type. If you see your function data type is void, that means it has no return type, right? It will do all the tasks inside this curly bracket, but it will not return any value. If you see this integer or float, data type functions, it will return value. That means you can use that value to operate another tasks. Okay, if you want to calculate this value, you can just calculate it using these functions. All right. So let me give you some example in code blocks, so it will be more clear. Let's open the code blocks. Okay, let's say we open file now, we name it function AI-19. All right, okay, include library. Now we call the main method. This main method is a function talking about, right? This is the main function. Okay. Now what we want to do is we want to make our own function. Okay, let's write integer sum integer num1, integer num2. These are parameters. So what we want to do is just return the sum. Integer sum numbers. Let's see. Some numbers equal to num1 plus num2, right? Then return this some numbers. That's it, right? Simple, right? You create your own method, own function. So how you call it in main method. So in order to call your main method, you need to have these parameter values, right? So first you have to define two integers. Number one maybe, integer. Number two, let's say 2. So now you can call this sum function to calculate their sum. Number 1, then number 2. Okay. In return that function, it cannot print straight. So you have to put this function into printf. Okay. Then we put the function integer symbol. Okay, there is no error, so we can run. So you see the output is 3. Output is 3. Sum is 3. Okay, now you see the output. Alright. So this one we can make little advanced using scan, right? We can ask our user to enter their own value. Let's say enter first integer equals scan, then this integer. So we put, okay, now we can copy paste this. Enter second integer, this one, number 2, right? Okay. Oh, we forgot the semicolon here. All right, so our program is asking us to enter the first integer, let's say 3. second integer, let's say 5. So it's calculating, our function is calculating 3 plus 2, right? So sum is 5. So main thing is here, your function is working. This is your function, right? So if you want to use this return value, you can define some value, for example, value. Okay. So this value is a return value of the sum, which is uh, number 1 plus number 2, right? Sum of this number 1 and number 2 values. So if you want to use this value in another, let's say for arithmetic calculations, you can use, for example, integer new sum, which is, let's add this sum of number 1, number 2 to number 1 value. Okay. Now we calculating using this function's return value, new sum. Okay. Let's put here. Let's check. Okay, let's say 2, 3. So 2 plus 3 is 5, and 5 plus 2, which is number 1's value, is 7. So our program is working, right? So that's the difference. You can do some operations using this return value of function, right? Now we will see the no return type function. Let's write it here. We say void, right? Void sum, let's say 2. You cannot rename, you cannot give same name to two functions. Okay? Let's put parameters. Okay, now here, what we can do is just print out the sum of these two values. That's the void function's uh, main functionality. Okay, let's say sum is equal to num1 plus num2. All right, now we have here is print sum is okay. So here now we're going to call sum2. Then we give our user entered values. Let's see. Okay. We forgot semicolon again. That's why we debug it to find where is error. Okay. All right. First integer is 5. Second integer, let's say 3. So our void function, void data type function is working. See that? This is void data type function. It's printing inside this. All right. It has no return value, so you cannot calculate this. If you put like this, integer value equal to this sum, it will not give you any output. It should not give you output. So this is void function. This is integer function, which we call it return type function. Normally, when we start writing program for Arduino, we use a lot of void functions. We don't want any return value. We want this do some functionality inside this function, right? That's it, I think. In a few class, we will start writing code for Arduino. I think that's it for today. So if we sum up, so we learn about functions or methods. Method or function is the same thing. So how you define it, function must have these two brackets, and function must have data type, and function can have or can hold parameters. If you don't want this function hold any parameters, you can just delete this, right? You can just put these things inside this parameter, inside this function, then you can just delete this. So this function will ask the user to enter the number inside this function, right? Let's see what is saying. There is no num1. Force there is no num1. Okay. Alright, now there is no error. Okay, so let's run. You see, this user entering the number function is inside this our void sum2 function. It's not holding any parameters. It can be inside this function's what we call block. Opening, close, and opening and closing curly brackets. What we call is a block. This block is holding to ask the user to enter their integer, then it's calculating their sum within the function. In main method, there's nothing but just call the function. See, we have nothing in main method. We're just calling the function. Function is doing all the work here, all the statements, all the functionalities. You see, it's calculating, it's working. So one important thing of function is it can simplify your code when you write like hundreds of thousands of lines of code. Uh, it may get confused. So that's the reason we have a functions. Functions will simplify your code. Function will hold a specific function, specific tasks, and you can use it again and again in main method. All right, you can reuse this function, this sum function, how many times you want. It depending on you. You write one function, you can reuse it 100 times, 100 functions. All right, you can use one function inside another function if you want. It's also possible. But today's lesson, let's keep it easy. You learn about what is function. Function is a collection of tasks or statements, and you have two types of functions, which one has a return value, another one has no return value, which we call it void functions, right? That's it for today, and next classes we'll see more examples. All right, see you next week.